Welcome everyone to our August talk. We are so lucky to have the amazing Elliot here today. Elliot is an electrical contractor. He's with his own business and a busy family life. He's passionate about breaking the stigma around mental health, and particularly in our industry. He found himself in a dark place and has had to overcome several personal challenges, including addiction and alcoholism. It got to the point where he knew he had to do something about it and embarked on his transformative journey. Please be aware that this session will include some sensitive topics, including references to alcoholism and abuse. We understand that this content may be distressing for some individuals, so please do feel free to reach out to ourselves and the welfare team after if you need any support. The talk will be around 40 to 45 minutes long, and then my colleague Ezra will be facilitating a Q&A at the end. So please do make use of the chat facility, and yeah, we will answer any questions. Elliot will answer any questions afterwards. So yeah, this will be recorded. Please keep your cameras off as well and mics off for duration. And without further ado, Elliot, it's amazing to have you. Over to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me to do this, Lucy. It's a privilege to talk about myself, the subject that I do know the best. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for giving up your lunches to sort of have a listen, and hopefully my story can inspire some people, and yeah, see what happens. So yeah, who am I? I'm an electrical contractor. I'm Elliot. I'm a father to 3 young girls. Got an amazing wife called Zoe. But earlier this year, I won the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award, and the first time ever I got a chance to meet Rachel Riley as a man. That's quite an exciting, prospect. But yeah, I've got up on stage, and yeah, the nerves got the better of me, and missed my opportunity. As you can see, my business coach Andy there snuck in and managed to get the cuddle off Rachel instead of me. But yeah, so what I want to talk about today is just going from, having the pressures of the business, the pressures of fatherhood, and choosing to sort of make that change, really. So here, this is a picture of me and my mum when I was a kid, and obviously I didn't have any choice then to decide what to wear, where to go, what to eat. But as an adult, as you go through your life, you do get the choice to sort of choose where you want to go, in what direction you want to choose. So yeah, I'm going to start with my early years, really, and talking about when I was a child growing up. My mum, she was married to a fella for the first 14 years of my life. My stepdad, he was a great fella, to be honest. When he wasn't drinking, he wasn't on the drugs, he was a really nice man. Unfortunately, then times were sort of few and far between, really. Sorry, I'm having to open up here and be a bit vulnerable, so it does sort of get me going, really. But yeah, so growing up, I was sort of surrounded by alcohol, drugs at a young age. Me and my sisters, we'd see violence, we'd experience violence and abuse quite often. So yeah, you were sort of waking up the next day and you didn't know what sort of person you were coming downstairs to, which was quite nasty. And then obviously growing up, that sort of did linger with me. In my early years, especially at school, I was quite an angry person, as you can see here. Having a picture, there's a picture here of me having a rhinoplasty, I think it's called, after many fights. And I did play rugby as well, so broke my nose quite a few times to a point where I couldn't breathe through it. So yeah, a lot of this you'll sort of, as we go through, you'll realise that your decisions, your environment, it's all sort of based on when you were a kid and how you can actually break through that, if that makes sense. So I'm going to keep going through the journey and talking about that. So after I left school, I became an apprentice, became an electrician, and I met Zoe at the age of 21, and we had our first child at the age of 23 after a miscarriage. So when I first met Zoe, within 9 months, we fell pregnant. Zoe became pregnant, obviously, and then we had a miscarriage, but we got used to the idea of becoming parents. So luckily for us, we tried again, and yeah, we had our first daughter, Alexandria, which was amazing, brilliant experience, but also brought the pressures of at 23 having a young child. It was something obviously I didn't know anything about, and the reason I want to talk about that is because it was the reason that I went self-employed in the first place. So the person I was working for at the time, he didn't really understand family values and stuff like that. And when I asked for the time off to be obviously for the parental leave and stuff, he actually refused it. So I actually had to take some holiday. He only authorised a week's holiday. And as you can see here, Alexandria, when she was born, she was born with jaundice. So she had to go on this special sunbed for a week. So yeah, so the whole week was in hospital, and then when we actually got a chance to take her home, I was straight back to work again. So I didn't actually get time to sort of digest being a father. So, and people who are parents will know for the first sort of 6 months of being a dad, you don't really get any reactions from the kids, from the child. So it can be quite a hard thing. You think, what are you doing this for? And yeah, it's quite hard. In a way, it sounds selfish, doesn't it? But it is. It's nobody teaches you how to become a dad or what the pressures of being a dad are going to be, or the family and stuff like that. So yeah, so this is the bit that we spoke about with Lucy yesterday, and it's quite hard to sort of talk about it because when you become a dad, and like I say, you haven't got anybody around you because every child is different. Let's face it, every child you have it's a different experience. And I remember the first night that Zoe went away with the first night away from being a mum, which she was definitely deserved. I was sort of left with this little baby who, I didn't know how to look after her. I knew how to wipe her bum and stuff like that, obviously. But there was a particular night I want to talk about, and it was that night that Zoe was away. Alexandria just would not go to sleep, and I was tired, I was knackered. So the only things I could think to do was to put her in the car. And I drove to Bradford. She fell asleep in the car. I got back home, took her out of the car. She woke up crying. So I put her back in the car and I drove from Harrogate, where we lived, to Leeds this time. She fell asleep. I drove back. And again, she was just crying. And it got to a point where I remember standing there with her and I was sort of looking at how beautiful this little girl is. And I just felt so angry. And all this anger had overcome me because in my childhood years, I'd never sort of dealt with how, my emotions and stuff like that. And I just remember holding her and just thinking, oh my God, will you shut up? But, for me, luckily, I was quite strong-minded and I just put her down and I sort of she did eventually go to sleep. So, yeah, but obviously nobody teaches you all that sort of stuff and how to deal with your emotions. And I think it's quite hard as well because I remember with Alexandria, when we went to the pre sort of assessments before she was born, and the nurses and everything, you sort of go with there, and obviously all the checks are to do with the baby, the mother, and rightly so as well. But I remember sort of sitting there, and nobody asked how I was feeling about how I was going to be, about becoming a dad and all this sort of stuff, and I just kept on getting forms thrown at me to sign and. Do this, do that, but nobody was asking, my emotions, how I was feeling about becoming a dad. And truth be told, I was absolutely, I was very nervous, all this change and stuff. So yeah, I don't think there's enough help for people, especially men, when it comes to newborn babies. And women don't get enough help as it is, but men don't get any help when it comes to babies and stuff, really. So yeah, so obviously that was quite hard. So yeah, so we sort of went through there, and then we had our second child, Felicity, within the space of just over a year. So, by the age of 25, I was a dad to 2 children. By that point, I'd gone self-employed as well. So obviously the pressures of a young family, a wife, all these people that rely on you, and the fact you've gone self-employed as well. It was very hard trying to bring all the work in to support that sort of family. And then as we got through there, we'd sort of got ourselves to a point where the girls were both at school or nursery, and we felt like we were getting our lives back. Yeah, and then boom, you've got then COVID. COVID hit, obviously the business, everybody panicked, nobody knew what COVID was. We're all told to sort of stay at home, so that's what I did, stayed at home. Didn't work, relied on government sort of loans to come in and stuff like that. I mean, thinking back, I was technically classed as a key worker, so I could have gone to work. But when you're depressed and you're sort of feeling down, and you see all this news, the stuff going around in the news, you sort of just go into this place where you don't know what to do, and you just sort of, so I did for COVID. I stayed at home, got myself into more debt, and tried to spend as much time with the family as possible. But even through that sort of depression, with all that time at home with the kids, and yes, I was there, but I wasn't ever really there in my mind, if that makes sense, or the sort of the fear, everything sort of taking over. And it's weird because when you do have all that fear, you think you should actually go and do something about it, but you don't. You sort of sit there and just let your brain take over and make it even worse, I suppose. So yeah, so I went through COVID like everybody else. Obviously, it was a very hard time for the business. We'd obviously, again, I was a young person, all these kids, the business, stuff like that. It was just, it was really tough. So yeah, and then boom, on came number 3, which was a massive shock to us. And again, more pressure, another mouth to feed, another child to clothe. And I was oh God, just felt like we'd gone back to the baby stage again. And I just thought, oh, well, I've got to work more hours. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that. And that's what I did. I just started working stupid hours every hour I could, bringing the money in, burning out, and getting more and more sort of distant from my wife and my kids, really. So that sort of happened. And then just after obviously, Sophia was born, our second child, Felicity, she then became really ill, which again was another knock at the time. Again, I was thinking selfishly, I was thinking, great, more time off work. How am I going to do this? I need the money. So yeah, it was really hard, but this all came around from tonsillitis of all things. So it's one of them things you don't think is going to be that bad. She was getting tonsillitis quite often, was Felicity. So we took her to the hospital, and they misdiagnosed her with a viral tonsillitis. We thought it was going to clear up, so we went on our holidays down to Great Yarmouth. Unfortunately, her neck started swelling up, and it was really bad. So we ended up having to take her to a hospital in Great Yarmouth, who then referred us straight to Norfolk University Hospital, where we would end up spending a couple of weeks down in Norwich. Obviously, we were away from home. We don't have all our clothes and stuff like that. It was a very stressful time. Obviously, I'm not working. And it turned out she'd got an infection in her neck. So they were pumping loads of antibiotics into her. And unfortunately, it just wasn't going down. But from my side, I said, can we transfer her up to Harrogate? Because Harrogate Hospital at the time was just at the end of our road. So they agreed to it. So I drove her all the way up to Harrogate Hospital, and we actually stayed there for one night. And then Harrogate Hospital said, actually, we can send you, because you're so close to the hospital, we'll send you home and we'll give you the antibiotics just daily. You just have to come back to the hospital and have antibiotics. And we said, that's brilliant. And they said, right, cool, go home, but we just want you to do a scan first. So they did a scan of her neck. We took her home. Within 2 hours of getting home, they rang us and said, you need to bring her straight back to hospital because there's an ambulance here waiting to take her to York Hospital. So obviously you're in panic mode. You're like, oh God, what's going on? So obviously we got to the hospital and they blue lighted her straight to York, which I don't know if anybody has ever been in an ambulance with your child looking like that. It was just the scariest thing that could, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. You're sort of looking through the ambulance window and you're praying all these cars move out of the way because, your little princess is sat there and you want to get her to care as quick as you can, really. So we off went to York. When we got there, they took us straight into surgery, and they had to relieve this big swelling that had happened on her neck. And then they came out and they explained why they'd done it. And basically, the tonsillitis that she'd been diagnosed with, it was actually it wasn't a viral infection, sorry, it was a bacterial infection, and the bacteria had spread from tonsil into one of the lymph nodes. caused her neck to swell up, and it pressed against the jugular vein and caused a clot in the jugular vein. So at this point, in children, it doesn't happen, especially not happened in the UK before. So we said, what's the next steps? And they said they had to give her some sort of blood thinner. But the problem is, because she's a child, they don't have a blood thinner for children. And they were basically saying, if we don't give her enough blood thinner, the clot could get bigger. If we give her too much blood thinner, it could kill her, sort of thing. And then they were like, and obviously the clot could actually move from where it is further up and get stuck. So yeah, so we sort of spent more time in York Hospital, and it was quite horrible, really, because obviously they don't know what's happening. My mum is an ODP, works in theatres, and she was basically saying that she could die, and it was absolutely horrendous. So I remember going home for one night. So the whole time I spent every night in hospital with Felicity, because obviously Zoe had our youngest Sophia at the time. So I spent every night in hospital. I got one night away, and I went home and I just sat next to Felicity's bed, crying because her bed was empty, and obviously it should be her in there. And I was terrified that she would never sleep in that bed again. So I spent the whole night crying. I went home, obviously went into my own bed and managed to fall asleep, and then went back there to be with Felicity. So yeah, it was very hard, obviously, trying to manage the business, no money really coming in, because the business just relied on me at the time. And obviously, but you've got to be there for your little girl. But I felt really sort of selfish that I was thinking about work when I'm obviously sat next to her as well, and whatever else. It was really hard trying to balance all that sort of stuff. Anyway, luckily we managed to, Felicity, she obviously, the antibiotics started working and everything cleared up eventually, and we managed to take her home, which was absolutely amazing. And then we got her home, and I then started playing six-a-side, started playing Sunday League football, and I snapped my ACL, which was daft, wasn't it? And then that meant another 3 months off work. Obviously, everything still relied on me. I felt like I was failing as a dad. I was turning 30. I was the unhealthiest I've ever been. As you can see from them pictures there, I might be smiling, but I don't know my face. If you can see, I wasn't there. I wasn't happy. I was driving home from work on a night. Just before my ACL, I was driving home on a night, and this is a trigger alert because obviously it's to do with suicide and stuff like that. I was driving home and I was thinking, well, if I drive into that tree over there, my insurance might pay out, and and at least the kids would be covered and everything would get paid off and all that sort of thing. Obviously, I don't think I'd have ever done that, truth be told, but that's the thoughts. And when you're driving, that's when you're by yourself, and that's when your sort of brain does take over, and it's a horrible place to be in, to be honest. So that was happening. Then obviously I snapped my ACL, and I was just like, oh God, what else can go wrong? Just kept on, felt like life was just hitting me all the time. I was just getting knocks from, all over the place. But I was one of them people. I was going out on weekends. I was drinking. I was doing drugs to try and forget about life, the pressure. It's amazing when you've got no money that you can still find money to go out with your mates and get drunk and do other stuff, because that's where I was at the time. It was quite hard. I was going to some of these events, these charity lunches with the EIC. I was getting invited, and I was in the toilets doing cocaine, which it's not a good place to be in. It's not the person I really wanted to be, but that was it was my release, and it was my way of forgetting about being a dad or a business owner for a while. It's not healthy, but that's where it was. It was quite a horrible place to be. So yeah, but there had to be some sort of change. There had to be something going on. Obviously, I had my wife, my kids, my why, but they weren't my priority. The business was my priority. Going out on weekends with other people, that found me fun if I was drinking and doing drugs, that was, they were my priority. But at home, I had 3 beautiful girls and a wife who, they loved me unconditionally. Even though I was going home, and I'm surprised Zoe stayed with me, to be honest, because I'd go home and I'd take it out on Zoe. I never physically ever hurt Zoe, but she was my verbal punching bag, if you like. I'd go home, and all the stresses that had built up, I'd take it out on her when I got home and tell her it was her fault because I was deflecting when really I knew it was my fault. It was quite a horrible time, really. I remember I started. It's the sort of the thing that started it, really. I started therapy because luckily for me, I've got self-realization. I know what I was doing, and I went to my therapist, and we were talking about it with my therapist. And luckily for me, I didn't have a therapist who was just one of the people who told me what I wanted to hear. So one of the things that sort of started this motion was we used to live in a masonette, and every day we'd walk past all the letters that were there on the side. And I remember going up and I used to have a go at Zoe because I'd have all these bills coming through, all these sorts of stuff. And I'd say, why haven't you told me that I owe this, I owe that, I owe this, blah, blah, blah. You know, I said, why don't you open the bloody letters? You've got one job. When truthfully, she had millions of jobs. She was a parent to my beautiful girls. She was a bookkeeper for the business, even though she had no experience as a bookkeeper, you know, but, you know, she did all the cooking, the cleaning, the tidying, everything. Bless her. She had all these jobs, and I was still having a go and saying, you have one job to open the post and you don't even do it. And the realization came when I was talking to my therapist, and I told this story about how she doesn't even open the post and all this sort of stuff. And my therapist says, do you walk past that post every day? And I said, yeah. And she just said, well, why don't you open it? And I was like, you know, I mean, it's daft, isn't it, to think, you know, but life could have been, I'd have known about all these bills a lot earlier if I'd have just taken responsibility for it and just opened the post myself. But, you know, when your brain's in that place, all these wires and stuff like that, every little thing is just, you know, it's not your fault, is it? So, yeah. Anyway, I know I wanted to change. So after the ACL had repaired and stuff like that, I was in the worst place I've ever been, the lowest I could ever be. And I just thought, you know what, I need to do something. Something has to change. So I went on to Eventbrite, and I saw this thing called 6 Steps to Success. And under it said something along the lines, we give family owners more time with their family, business owners more time with their family, if that makes sense. So I thought, right, well, what have I got to lose? So I gave up a Friday morning. I thought I'll spend half a day and I'll invest in myself to go to this event. I met Andy there, who was running the event. He was a coach. So I got speaking to him about it. And I said, look, I don't know what it's going to take, but I want to work with you. The stuff he was talking about business, I didn't know anything of that. So I thought, well, if he knows it, I want to work with him and he can teach me it. So I met with Andy, he told me the cost of business coaching, and truth be told, I gulped and went, shit, how am I going to pay for this? But I thought, I've got to make it work. I want to make it work. And if it doesn't work, what have I got to lose, to be honest? So I started with Andy. And yeah, the first thing he said to me, because I was talking about a lot of stuff, and first phrase he said to me was, what people think of me is none of my business. And just thought, well, wow, what a powerful statement. You know, I've heard it in other forms before, you know. But I just thought, yeah, that's so true. I can't control what people think of me. And truth be told, you know, it's in their brain. It isn't my business. So I met Andy, and yeah, he started introducing me to people in his network. And the first thing that really sort of got me going was I was on a walk. I wasn't into the gym. I hated the gym. I was terrified of going to the gym, if I'm honest with you. So I met a fellow through his network called Tom, who was a PT. Tom Melody, brilliant bloke. And the thing that Tom did with me is we just walked. We didn't touch a gym for about a month. We just walked. So I'd meet him at the Valley Gardens in Harrogate, and we'd just go for a walk around the Valley Gardens, and we'd talk. I'd get stuff off my chest. And the first time that there was a moment that went in my brain was I was complaining to Tom, and I said, do you know what? Because I was in that place, I says, I'm absolutely sick of these people who have a silver spoon shoved up their ass and get given this, get given that, and blah, blah, blah. And he turned around and he looked at me, and I thought, oh, no, I've hit a nerve here. And he said, wouldn't you do that for your children if you could? And I said, yeah. And he says, so what's the difference? And I thought, it's very true. Why wouldn't I want to give my kids that platform if I could tell them succeed? So, yeah. So that was the first time that I thought, right, I want to change and I want to get it going for them, really. And then 3 months into working with Andy, I went to a football match. I went to watch Barnsley versus Sheffield Wednesday in the playoff final, being a Barnsley fan. And I was still drinking and doing the drugs at this point. And I remember standing there drunk and shouting at a footballer for scoring a goal against us in the 123rd minute. I stood there shouting at him for doing his job. And I was so angry. I went off. I drank some more, got some cocaine and did some more cocaine. And yeah, just sort of went off the rails, really. I remember sitting on the tube with a load of Sheffield Wednesday fans, and I just and I felt so angry, and I just thought, you know what, if they want to have a go, I'll have a go with them. But luckily they left me alone, thank God, because there was a lot of them. But yeah, so I stayed in London that night. The next day I was on the train home. I was on the come down from the drugs, and I just felt like absolute crap. But I was looking around at all these other families, you know, I was looking at other business people doing work on the laptops and stuff. And I just a switch went in my head. I just thought, what am I doing? You know, I've got a beautiful family at home, I've got a wife who absolutely adores me, and I'm here, you know, feeling like this after some stupid decisions. And I'm happy to say that was the last time I ever drank or did drugs. So it's over 2 years now. So yeah. But within the first 6 months of meeting Andy, we got our first home. We don't own the home; it's on a rent-to-buy scheme, which is a government scheme, which is fantastic. This came about because I got used to talking to people, telling them what I wanted and stuff like that. Like I say, when I met Andy, we were living in a masonette that my mum owned. It was her house. It was falling into disrepair. Even my mum could afford to repair it. I couldn't afford to repair it. And it just wasn't a place that I wanted my kids to grow up in. I went to another football match, and I'd been invited to hospitality at Harrogate Town. So I went to there, and the lady I was sat next to at the time, she worked for Harrogate Council. I said we'd put ourselves down on the council list, and she said, "Oh, you don't want to do that." She says there's loads of schemes and stuff like that for first-time buyers, and she mentioned all these different schemes. Luckily, we came across this scheme where basically you rent the house for 5 years and you get the opportunity to buy it after the 5 years. It's fantastic. It's a house, it's got a garage, and it has free toilets. And anybody who lives with family knows that even though it's got free toilets, everybody seems to use the bloody same toilet still. So, yeah, but that all happened within the first 6 months of me and Andy because I was in a different environment. I was surrounded by people who wanted people to succeed. So yeah, it all started happening, all these things. I then met, obviously, I told you I'd met Tom. The great thing about Tom is he used to run some other things, not just gym stuff, but he did like community things. So we went and climbed Pen-y-Ghent up in the Lake District, in the Yorkshire Dales. It's the smaller of the Yorkshire Three Peaks. We did that. It took forever. I was absolutely blowing out my backside. And the week after, it's funny how things happen, because the week after I was then at the was it the week after? It was very close to that event. I was at the charity lunch I think it was in Harrogate at the time. Anyway, in the brochure, there was a brochure in the EIC saying that there was this challenge for a cause, which is Kilimanjaro. And I thought, you know what a way to prove to myself that I could go and do something, you know, a big challenge like that. It was £900 to sign up and climb Mount Kilimanjaro, 900 quid, which included your flights there and back, you know, your hotels while you were there, all the people setting up your tents, everything, you know, it was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, I had to buy some clothes and stuff on top of that as well, but 900 quid to go and do an experience like that. So I signed myself up to it, and initially it was just, you know, to start experiencing more things, but then I enjoyed raising money. I enjoyed the money raising for the charity and feeling like I was achieving something. So anyway, yeah, so within a year, I climbed the smallest peak in the Yorkshire Dales and went and climbed the biggest freestanding mountain in the world, in Kilimanjaro. And there's a picture of me at the top. It was really hard. It was very, very hard, to be honest. You get to a point called Stellar Point, which is on top. It's the top of Kilimanjaro, but it's not the highest part of the crater. I've got to Stellar Point. You get a certificate for that because you've technically climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. But I just thought I haven't gone all that way to tell my kids that I didn't, you know, to say I didn't get to the highest point. So it took what felt like hours to climb another 100 meters. I couldn't breathe at this point. It was really hard. The doctor Becky she was trying to convince me to go back, but then in the end she just said, you're not going to go back here. And I said no, and she was like, brilliant, let's just do it. So she walked with me all the way to the top. It was absolutely incredible. The views were amazing. It was just, yeah, it was incredible. You'd spent 5 days climbing, and on this particular night, you actually you set off at midnight to get there for sunrise. So we'd been climbing all the way through the night. It'd taken that long to get to the top. It was very, very hard. So yeah, so I got to the top, started going down. That was really hard. But basically, I'd pushed myself to the limit. We got down to the base camp, and which is at 4,000 and some meters. We got down to the base camp, and I still couldn't breathe. I was sat on the toilet, and I just thought there was things going through my head, and I just remembered Elvis Presley died sat on the toilet, and I'm currently sat on a toilet in a little tent on a mountain. And yeah, so anyway, I finished my business. I stumbled down to the tent where Becky, the doctor, was. And I said, Becky, will you check me over? Because I just can't breathe. So she took my vitals. My oxygen levels were at 68% out of 100, obviously. There'd been a fella who had just been airlifted off the mountain with a pulmonary embolism in his lung. And basically Becky was saying, she said, I can't believe how calm you are. To my response was, well, I can't panic, because if I do, that's just going to make it worse. So yeah, my blood pressure was all over the place. My oxygen levels were on their ass, basically. And yeah, so she says, right, we can either get you airlifted off the mountain to hospital, or we can try and take you down another 1,000 meters and try and get you sort of used to the air again. So that's what they did. They put me on a stretcher and they carried me down. I couldn't breathe. This is what you call a killie taxi. And it might look comfortable, but it's not. You feel every single bump in the road, because it's a stretcher that's got a wheel on the bottom of it. I mean, these amazing guys here, they carried me down on that, which is just unbelievable. They literally ran me down. These guys are amazing. So yeah, they got me down to the next camp. I slept for 12 hours. Becky gave me a load of steroids, and I woke up the next day and I felt brilliant. My oxygen levels were back up to 85% out of 100. So yeah, I walked the rest of the way down, which was absolutely amazing. But the thing is, I wouldn't have been able to do that challenge if I didn't have help. I didn't have all these people here. That team, the picture there, the team of people who helped me, climb Mount Kilimanjaro, we all helped each other. There was all points within that journey where we were struggling, and we had to, talk to each other and get each other drummed up to keep going and stick at it. And we did. It was amazing. The good thing about that challenge is, all them people that I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with, they're all still friends today. We went to Birmingham earlier in the year and we all met up again. We've got another meeting set up in September where we're all meeting again. You meet all these people as you start doing stuff. It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, so anyway, apart from the personal sort of things as well, my business started getting better. We did 80% more sales last year, because of the stuff that I've been doing, getting myself into that, going to all these self-development sort of seminars and meeting loads of different people, putting myself in a better environment, meeting people who are winning at life, So did all that. My family life's got so much better. Business has got better. Everything's just, it's been growing and growing. It's brilliant. But one of the main reasons behind it is because my therapist, she talks about it all the time, about our parents and stuff like that. But the first book that I read that was recommended to me was called The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. It was by a fellow called T. Harv Eker. And he talks about how we are our parents' blueprint. Our thoughts and our beliefs are all from when we were a child. And if you think about it, earlier, I mentioned growing up, I saw a lot of domestic violence on a daily basis. I saw drug abuse, drinking. My stepdad, I genuinely don't think he was a bad person. I think he was a nasty person when he was on the drink and the drugs and stuff, and I saw that growing up. And then on the other side, you've got my real dad, who was absolutely amazing. He's an amazing bloke. He's one of the nicest people you will ever meet. And he will openly admit to you that he's not a smart fella. He's got past things that have happened to him. But my dad he was a very supportive man. Luckily for me, I got to see him every other weekend, where my sisters didn't. They didn't see their dads. And the one dad they did have, their stepdad, he was, it was hard sort of thing. So I was quite lucky that I had my dad. But the problem with me growing up is my dad, he's your typical old school tradesman. He's a builder. He's in the pub every night. That's his life. That's how he socializes. He meets people in the pub, and that's what happens. So growing up, if I wasn't at home seeing, drinking drugs at home, I was out with my dad in beer gardens, seeing the other side of it, happy people, but drinking, if that makes sense. So for me growing up, it was always, well, drinking's the thing to do. It's socially acceptable. That's what you do. That's how you meet people. And yeah, so, but it's hard because I blamed my dad, who was an amazing man. He supported me. I blamed him when I first started this journey. I sort of blamed him for my past. I blamed my mum for my past as well, for obviously because she lived with this person for 14 years of her life. You know, she had this sort of, she was, you know, but she let that sort of happen, is what I thought. And then when I started working with my therapist, you know, you start realizing your parents have, you know, they're only as good as the tools they had at the time, their beliefs they had at the time. You know, my dad was incredible. He never had any money, but there's a picture here because my first memory and the happiest memory with my dad was we used to go through to York train station. We used to just sit there on a bench and count the carriages on a train. He didn't have any money, but he knew I loved trains, so that's what we'd do, and it didn't cost him much. So, you know, train tickets, that's what we'd do. It was amazing. And these are all little things you can maybe do with your kids, you know, if you haven't got money and stuff. Just, you know, it's about spending quality time. So, yeah, but another couple of quotes from that book, and I know it sounds quite harsh, but, you know, rich people believe I create my life. Poor people believe life happens to me. And that doesn't mean rich as in loads of money and stuff like that. It's rich, it's up here in your mind. You know, do you think you're a rich person? Do you think you're a poor person? And for a long time, you know, I was a poor person. That's what I felt. I felt like everything is just happening to me. That's what I felt. But I started this journey, you know, and that's when things started changing. I've started to create my life. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a millionaire. I'm far from it. My goal is I will be a millionaire one day, and you know, it's quite hard to say that out loud. It is quite hard to sort of admit, you know, say stuff like that, because you will get people who will look at you and go, no, you won't, and stuff like that. But for me, I will be, and you know, I've got a lot of things I want to do. I really want to help people with the mental health. This is only the start of the journey. You know, this presentation, you know, obviously I do jump around quite a bit as well, but it's like I say, it's the first time I've done this. So yeah. But then I started working with another fellow called James Burke. He runs an event called Master Your Life. And, you know, he's absolutely one of the gods of getting you thinking positively and just, you know, taking you through this journey. Again, what I've learned about personal development, it's not for everybody. I took my wife to one of his retreats, and she stepped out of the comfort zone and she hated it. You know, and that another challenge for me was why wouldn't you want to grow and stuff like that, you know? And that's what I found quite hard. But then another fellow called Mark Eccles helped me with that, and he said, you know, not everybody wants to go. Everybody, you know, some people are happy, they're comfortable. You know, what's wrong with that? You know, there isn't anything wrong with being comfortable, to be honest. My wife, she supports me, and her when we sat and we talked about it, she says, you know, I just want to support you because supporting you helps us grow as a family, which, you know, is amazing. And yeah, but that saying there, money is the root of all evil. After that, James goes on to talk about money isn't the root of evil. You know, I'm not here to give you financial advice because I'm the most impulsive person in the world. I just buy everything. I'm terrible. But the way I look at money now is, you know, going back, you know, all the things I heard growing up, you know, rich people are tight, rich people are bad, rich people are this, money's evil. Obviously, that same there. For me now, I look at money's fuel. Money is the fuel to go to where I want to go to. You know, your car, if you want to put petrol into your car, you know, you've got to have money to do that, and it gets you to where you want to go. And if you can look at money as fuel, and that's where, you know, look at it, it's fueling your next adventure, it's fueling where you want to go. You start looking at your priorities then, because you think, right, well, in the future, I want this for my wife and my kids. So what money do I need to do that? You know, so that's when you start making changes around that as well, which is amazing. But yeah, I'd recommend going to any sort of personal development things. There's loads of free stuff out there. But yeah, but all this stuff has helped me start winning at life, which goes on to the next stage. You know, here, obviously, I won an award earlier in the year, won the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. This is my apprentice, Tom, winning an award. He won the Apprentice of the Year at Harrogate College this year. And that came from, you know, putting in an application in. Well, the college messaged me and said, you know, would you like to put your apprentice up for this award? And I did. I put my apprentice up for it. You know, he absolutely deserved it. His record at college was absolutely amazing. He didn't have days off. He was in the top 3% of his class. An amazing lad. But even here, he was getting impersonator syndrome at this awards ceremony. he sat there and he was terrified of winning the award because it meant he had to go up and stand in front of people because he was worried that what people would think of him. And that was me before. I was doing all the stuff, you know, all the wrong stuff because I was worried what people might think of me. And I was thinking, well, people, you have to do this, you have to do that. And yeah, you live your life because based on what other people think, let's face it. So, but because I'm a firm believer in I was around people who were winning. I started winning, and then people around you start winning. And this is what I'm saying to you. The first bit of advice I would ever give to anybody is if you're down and you're struggling, look at the environment you're in. You know, can you take yourself to a different environment and start looking at, you know, like for example, look at people, you know, who are successful, who've written books, YouTube videos, all that sort of stuff. Find them on YouTube and learn from them, because all this stuff that you're wanting to do or you're wanting to get out of, somebody's written a book about it. They've done some sort of YouTube video about it. You know, there's so much information out there that could really, really help you. Yeah, so then after obviously becoming more attractive, doing Kilimanjaro with the charity, I got speaking to Kate Adamczyk, who works with the charity. She's an amazing woman as well. She did Kilimanjaro with us. And we were talking while we were climbing Kilimanjaro, and she mentioned about the Emerging Professionals Board. So I put an application in to join the Emerging Professionals Board and got involved with the charity. And this is where I started to realise how amazing this charity really is. You know, the help they can give to people. And this is why it's really important for people to let people know about this charity, especially in this industry, because there's so much help out there that people don't know about. If you look at this charity as a guardian angel that you didn't know you had, you know, because of the support they can give you, the therapy. I don't think it depends. I'm not sure on that, but yeah, I know there's people that are definitely allowed to have 6 free sessions with a trained therapist. And then from there, I think it'd obviously maybe look at your financial background and stuff like that. But there is loads of help out there on that side. There's help with bereavement. There's loads of help with just general mental health in general and stuff. So they do so much, to be honest. I can't tell you exactly how much, all the stuff that the charity do because I've only been on the board for 6 months. But it's incredible. And just, yeah, have a look and see what charity can do for you. Like I said earlier, I firmly believe you should invest in you. That doesn't mean investing loads of money into you. That could be time. You know, you can invest time into you. Time is just as important as money. If you can read up books, you know, these books, they'll probably cost you a tenner, something like that. You might even be able to get some free ones off people. If you speak to people, they might have these books lying around that you could read. So I would say invest in your knowledge, invest in your health. There's loads of podcasts, videos and stuff out there that can really help you. But the biggest thing you've got to do is you've got to ask. You're never going to get anything in life if you don't ask, because you've got to get it out of your brain. You've got to let people know you're suffering. Let people know that, you know, the challenges you're facing and stuff like that. People will help. People won't do it all for you. That's the thing. People won't do it all for you. But if you show willing and you ask for help, people, I'm telling you now, people are nice people. Don't get me wrong, there probably is bad people in this world, but the majority of the people in this world are good people that want to help you. And if you ask, they can direct you into different areas, because not everybody knows everything about mental health. So they might turn around and say, I don't know how to help you with that, but hopefully they can put you in the direction, you know, that will get you help. Them 4 books at the bottom are the best books I've ever read. Yeah, so if you want to take a screenshot of that, please do. But Jim Rohn, the fella on the left, he's like the godfather of personal development. I would highly recommend looking him up. He's quite harsh. A lot of the sort of tasks he'll get you to do, and these are all free, by the way. You can find these on YouTube. A lot of the tasks he will get you to do is sort of self-reflection. Self-reflection is the hardest thing you'll ever do. Looking into yourself, looking at where you're going wrong and stuff like that. It's horrible. It really is horrible. But when you start working through it, it's amazing. It really is, because you start getting the things you want in life. Another saying that I've been told, you know, you can't have everything. But what? No, sorry, that's wrong. It's completely wrong. The saying goes, you can have anything, you just can't have everything. And that's where you sort of get onto your goals and stuff like that. If there's something you really want, you can have it. You've just got to work out a plan of how to get there. You know, and if you are struggling, therapy is a great way of helping you get that plan and start working towards what you want. The biggest thing another thing I can recommend you do as well. So I'm lucky enough that I can afford to get business coaching, personal coaching, all that sort of stuff. Every coach I ever work with or meet or anything like that, you know, the first thing we do when I walk in with Andy, my coach, we talk about the wins for that week. It doesn't matter how big, how small they are. We talk about our wins because you've got to celebrate your wins. It doesn't matter how small you are. If you're sat on, and some people disagree with this, but I think I think it's true. If you're sat there currently, you know, at home, feeling sorry for yourself in a way that, you know, you're just not doing anything, you're not existing. One of the wins could be that you left your house today, you walked down the street, you know, that's a win. Because then the next day you could walk down another street, you could walk a bit further, you could do something, you know, you could progress. Another saying again, it's not about perfection, it's about progression. You know, if you could progress 1% every day, obviously after 100 days, you'd be 100% better off than where you are now, sort of thing. So it's one of them, really. You know, last year I had so many wins, absolutely loads of wins. Obviously, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, it's amazing. I got my first house with the kids and stuff like that. You know, one of the wins I've got last year, I went to watch Barnsley away at Manchester United in the Carabao Cup. We lost 7-0. And you're thinking, well, how's that a win? But for me, I got to go to Manchester United, Old Trafford, and watch my team play Manchester United in a competitive match at Old Trafford, which is, you know, one of the most historic stadiums in the UK. You know, and that's the power of it. It's just looking at it. And another bloke called Paul Moore, who's another coach, he gives you a tip actually on your wins. Look back through your phone. Always look back through your camera on your phone and look at the wins you've had this year, because it gives you so much confidence to keep going. It makes you realise how great you actually are, if that makes sense. So again, this slide, it's a bit harsh, but you know, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to sit there and have the hard times, or are you going to ask for help? Because if you ask for help, it starts leading on to better things. I can tell you now, the more that people help you, the more you start, you know, winning, the more of effect it'll just have, and it just triggers something just starts happening. The more you start doing, the more it starts happening. It's the same with negativity. If you're sat there with a load of negative things going on, you know, you're just going to attract more negative stuff. If you can start being positive and start, you know, reframing this brain of yours and start thinking positively, if you can, or if you can be surrounded by people who are positive, that want to pull you up with them, you know, not put you down, but want you to rise, you know, you'll start winning. And that's when the knock-on effect starts happening. You'll just keep winning. Now, I know it's harsh, but it is true. You've got to take ownership. And just to end the slide here is a picture of some people that, you know, have really helped me through my journey so far. If you want to take a picture of that and look at these people, there's loads of free content online from these people. There's loads of free events they put on. There's loads of events that they put on that's paid as well. They run loads of different coaching courses and stuff, but there's all sorts of stuff that can help you. So yeah, I'll leave that on the screen if anybody wants to help, needs help. So yeah, that's the end of it. I'm hoping that's all right. And sorry if I've waffled a bit.
That's great. Thank you so much, Elliot. That was really interesting. I'm just going to pop a couple of things into the chat. Just our number for the support line and also the email address for our support inbox if you would feel like anything that came up today might want to get in touch about. So we've got a few questions as well, Elliot, in the chat. So, oh, sorry, Chloe, did you have your hand up there? So yeah, just a few questions in the chat. Lucy asked, where did you find your first therapist, and how did you find the first few sessions for someone who hadn't been to therapy before?
So, like I say, I was really angry with Zoe over nothing, over the letters and stuff like that. So I went on Google, to be honest, and looked at the therapists in my area. For me, I found she was a woman called Liz. I'd say she was close to retirement, and I wanted somebody who wasn't just gonna sort of, I don't know, I felt more comfortable with her, if that makes sense. So I went to her, and like I say, she was just straight at me. You know, she didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. She told me what I needed. You know, and that's hard. It really is. Self-reflection's hard.
What advice would you give to people who find it difficult to speak out?
You don't have to speak out like I'm doing now. You don't have to do it in a public setting. There's obviously there's charity. There's various other clubs. For men, there's a thing called Andy's Man Club. You can go there and just get some off your chest. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. Just talk to people who you trust, if that makes sense. Go to. It's quite hard actually, because I think there's still a stigma from this is why I want to do it as a contractor, and this is why I wanted to do help with a charity, because I don't think employers do enough with that stigma, around mental health. I think there's still some people who would be scared to go to their employer because they're fearing they might lose a job and stuff like that. So you don't have to do stuff like that. Go on the internet, find something and talk to people, that are nothing to do with where you are, if that makes sense. Talk to people who don't know you, if that makes sense as well.
Another question, please. If someone is beginning a journey of sobriety, what advice could you give them for attending social events? That's really interesting.
So the hardest part of me stopping drinking, to be honest, I'd go to events and I'd have people that didn't really believe that I could stop drinking, and they'd say to me, "Oh, just have one. It's only one," and and it is what it is. And the amount of mates who, friends who called me all sorts of names, the amount of times I got called a puff for not drinking. I think you just got to accept that you're going to get called these names. I know it's horrible and stuff like that, but once you start to realize that they're just words and they don't hurt, you can get through it. I think that's when you start taking control of it. You've got to want to stop at the end of the day. And if you really want to stop, people calling you names and stuff like that, you'll get over it, and you'll realize if these people are really that nasty to you, are they worth your time? Do you want to spend time with these people?
Definitely.
I know it sounds quite harsh, but that's what I'm saying about environment. Look at your environment. Are the people in your environment, are they good for you?
Definitely. What advice would you offer someone who doesn't know sort of where to start in looking for support?
So, the internet. I'd definitely go on the internet. I would look at YouTube. Like I say, I think my screen's still being shared. You can look at them people there. There's loads of videos on there that might just get you thinking and just get you start a chain of reaction, wanting the help and stuff like that. If you've got money, if you've got a bit of money, like I say, it's quite interesting because you get people who say, I'm going to go back, and it's going to be quite controversial here. There was an MP who said that if people didn't spend £4 on a coffee, they'd be able to buy their own house and stuff like that. Now, that was absolutely ridiculous, but what he was trying to say was, have a look at where you're spending your money and you prioritize. And if you can afford a coffee, then you can probably afford something else. Therapy for me, my therapist should cost me £50. I'm sure you can find £50 to invest in yourself. However, if you can't find that money, you really don't have any money. Like say, you've got the Electrical Industries Charity. There's free therapy on the Electrical Industries Charity. But the one thing I would say is, if you've got a bit of money, invest it in yourself. Your health is more important than anything. Your time, your health is something you can never get back. So I'd invest it wisely. People going about money, your time is just as important. You need to learn to invest that wisely as well.
Yeah, I guess sort of following on from the idea of investing your time, how do you find supporting apprentices, and do you have any advice on people who are starting their journey in the industry?
Yeah, I think apprentices shouldn't be scared of going into the industry. I think there is a lot less stigma around it. I don't think there's as much bullying around apprentices as much anymore. If you're an apprentice and you're going into the industry, I think it's a brilliant industry to be in. I think there's a lot more help out there now. Again, the electrical industry have a lot of help for apprentices. I think, the only advice I can give an apprentice is go for it. You've got nothing to lose. It's a brilliant career to get into. Personally, I don't think there's enough people in the trades. You're never going to be out of work being as an electrician. Don't get me wrong, you might have to be a bit more thick-skinned. You shouldn't have to be. You shouldn't have to be thick-skinned to go into the trade. But if you're wanting to get something you want, just remember that words and stuff people say to you, don't take things to heart. Feedback you get from employers as well and stuff like that is because they've got your best interest in heart. Can't say the word. They've got your best interest, basically. They want to help you. They want to help you succeed. Don't take things personally.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to pop your hand up or just shout out. Otherwise, I think that might be everything. No? All right then. I've popped a little link to our feedback survey in the chat as well for everybody. If you could just take a second to fill that out. And yeah, just again, thank you so much, Elliot. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if people can leave as much feedback as well for me, because motivational speaking, coaching is something that I do want to get into. I want to help people. I want to help as many people as I can, you know, pull themselves up from that bad place. So yeah, any feedback you've got for me, please, you know, please share it. 100%.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.